but I also developed the first calculators, small portable calculators. They were only
No
the second
kidding.
one in Japan and one in Taiwan was mine. And I was the first person to sell calculators in the United States for under $100. A small four-function calculator.
Hello, everyone. Welcome to the Author Spotlight brought to you by Apex Media Global. I'm your host, Monica, and it's so good to be back with our guest. I think his own personal life takes the cake, like it's much more interesting than his books. That's how interesting his life is. I mean, like imagine like having a decades long career in writing, technical writing, taking data, and then turning that into persuasion and sales, and then being inspired to actually write novels, and then you celebrate your like 90th birthday, but you're still working and being a novelist. Like a lot of people would just be like, you know what, I'm done, I'll retire. But for our guest today, it was a blank slate, blank page, and then he just started writing. So I'm so excited to talk to Harold Myers today. Harold, thank you so much for being here.
Thank you for having me. That I don't think you get the opportunity to talk to too many 90-year-olds.
Absolutely. I mean, like, this is a privilege. So thank you so much for taking time to be here. I was going through your website, I was going through your interviews, and I'm just really inspired by your own personal story. So I hope it's not a lot if I just start asking about that. But I guess it's also fitting to start from the beginning, from your inspiration, what inspired you to start writing. Like I mentioned a while ago that you kind of started in like sales and marketing and started writing, and then you got like a deal with IBM, and then like so when you started there, and then I thought about it and how do you become a novelist, and it's like you turn data and then you start persuading people, and I think you just start mastering the craft of managing people's attentions. And that's also what you do when you write a novel. And so, at what moment did you realize that you could actually do that? Like the sudden shift of from writing like really technical um, pieces to like imaginative novels. I mean, you also mentioned you were in your daughter's apartment and then you felt like this pain in your arm when you woke up. So could you tell us a little bit more about that?
Um, I think to begin with, back in the old days, there was a lot of electronic magazines and even some electronic newspapers. And as part of my marketing and sales effort, I began to write articles on various products. And I would describe them and how they could use the power supplies that my company was building. And so it sort of led me after I had written a few articles and I was actually received a check for one for $100. And I said, geez, maybe I can, make some money out of this by writing, you know, and but I then felt I could write and I started attending some writing classes that were, and then I attended some weekends where they had writing seminars, etc. And I started to get the idea and that I could also write. And so it really started then, probably in the early 90s, mid 90s. long time ago that I actually felt. And then I had written a number before I ever did a novel. I had written a number of short stories. I still have them, and they accumulate them and try to put them into another book. But it was of interest to me, and after writing the first book, I felt like I was confident enough I could write a second, third, fourth, and I've now written a fourth, by the way. It was just accepted the other day. So,
Wow. Congratulations.
yeah,
Can you give us a little sneak peek or is that too soon?
right. So, I mean, that was the beginning of it.
Yeah. Yeah. So your new book, what inspired it? Can you give us a little insight on your new book?
The new one, it's the same group that was assembled in Blanton Arms and Polish Popcorn Company.
Mm-hmm.
Except now they are using some of their wealth that they gathered from crooks and whatnot. They broke into banks and whatnot, and they decided to assist African countries in getting rid of rebels and armies and whatnot and trying to stop some of the wars because they noted that the casualties were very great. And so it goes on from there. It's actually, I call it, I may change the title of it, but right now it's called Jack's Group, an African Experience.
Jack's Group,
Jack's Group.
as in Jack Hudson.
Yes, yes.
Wow. So it's in the same universe.
Pardon me?
So the new book is in the same universe as Jack Hudson, Blanton
Right.
Arms, and wow. Wow.
Well, I
Okay.
don't name him. I just say Jack's Group, and that's what it is. Now, there are other new characters in there that they meet from Africa, etc. But outside it, that the core of the group is the seven people that were in previous stories.
Right. I'm actually excited to talk about Jack Hudson, your book Blanton Arms. I guess it's a fitting transition now. So Jack's group, for our viewers who don't know, is inspired by Jack Hudson, one of the characters, the lead characters in Blanton Arms. And he's
Right.
a CIA operative. So navigating dangerous situations in Moscow and Washington, D.C. So my question is, since I kind of hinted at it in the intro, that your personal life is just like, the epitome of resilience. But also, I wanted to ask if your personal experience being in the Marines actually inspired Jack's personal story in the book.
Um, no, not really. No,
Hmm.
no. I mean, I didn't bring anything in. The Marine Corps, since I was had a rather strange upbringing, the Marine Corps became my family, and they guided me to what I eventually became. They set up rules for me. They gave me confidence, etc., and went on from there.
Yeah.
I think,
Yeah. Well, um, uh, at least you weren't CIA or you weren't getting shot at. That's something that Jack definitely was
well,
going through in the books. Yeah.
yeah, I think in all my books, I've done a lot of research on, and I like to say it's possibly partly reality fiction,
Mm.
because in all my books, every place I name is a real place. Every street I name is a real street, or an avenue, or a highway. from one city to another that is used in the story. And so that is somewhat from some of my experiences is that I um, prefer to use realistic places. And it was interesting in the case of Blanton Arms, Jack in the White House, how much information I could get out of the internet about the White House. And when I talk of them driving up the driveway, I know exactly how long that is, how the distance and how fast you can go, the buildings around that are exterior to the White House, the Treasury Department, that sort of thing. I studied all that and said, hey, I can claim this or claim that, and Jack outwits the Secret Service. I mean, he finds way to get to the president and and possibly do harm, but he doesn't do any harm, but he at least has found ways that the Secret Service weren't covering it properly.
That's interesting. What is something interesting you found out about the White House that you don't think is
Uh,
common knowledge?
well, one of the first things, he goes to he gets an invitation as a Texan because you have to get an invitation to go in there on a
Hmm.
tour. And he goes in and he does the 30 or 40-minute tour inside the White House. And he comes out and he realizes he could never fulfill his plan inside the White House. In other words, he feels within the White House you could never get to the president. There are too many eyes, video cameras, people, et cetera, and he could never accomplish anything in the White House. So he had to switch his strategy and go from the outside. And that's when he learned about the White House, the trees in there, the buildings out exterior to it, et cetera, the length from the gate to the White House. I mean, different things.
Wow. I mean, that's kind
So
of
it does,
reminiscent. Mhm.
it takes a little research.
Yeah, I would imagine it's kind of reminiscent of how you were doing your technical articles back in the day, where it was like really precise technical details. And now with your novels, you have to know about like the precise information about the weaponry and the distance from the driveway to the White House.
Yes,
Would you
that
say
was
that?
all. That was technical information,
Yeah, it was.
and I'm writing about fiction. Yes, that's
Yeah,
true. I didn't put those two together, and then that you're absolutely right that I used my engineering to figure
yeah,
out how to get from A to B, and
exactly. Yeah,
so
it's quite rare, the balance of the left and right brain, the analytical side and the creative side. That's the
right,
both worlds. Yeah. What about the Polish popcorn company? How did you do
right.
your research on that?
Story, of course, starts out when Jack and his wife are in Hawaii for her birthday, etc. And they hear some Arabs talking, etc., and figure out they're going to blow up a hotel. But they solve that issue along with the FBI, etc. But the FBI, knowing that both Jack and his wife are have years of experience in illegal arms and stuff of this nature, that they have this problem in Europe and people are being killed by bombs that can't be traced. And so they agree to go to Europe and work with Interpol and try to solve this problem. And so that's when I had to create Paulie Zubinski. Uh,
Hmm.
that's an interesting story too, because my very close friend who assisted me in writing, he's 93, um, used to give me tips on writing all the time because he was a writer. And he's Polish. And so I
Ah.
thought I'd make it in Poland. His name is Paul, where you get Paulie. And Zubinski, I called him and I said, Paul, can you give me a Polish name? I need it. I'm doing something in my book and I need a Polish name. He says, use Zubinski. That was my grandmother's name. So I used
Oh,
Paulie Zubinski as the guy.
straight from
So
the source.
that was kind of creative.
Yeah. Now, AI couldn't do something like that. I'll tell you that much. That
But see,
that's
nobody would
funny.
recognize it except him.
Exactly. And it's like
In fact,
immortalized forever.
on the cover of the book, it says Zubinski's candy store on the
Mm.
cover of the Polish Bacon Factory, and so I sent it to him, and he laughed about it.
Oh, that's funny. That's funny. That's
Yeah.
an interesting story. Did you come up with Polly like in the beginning before you were writing the story? Because I
No,
remember you meant right.
no, I did not. I came up. I knew it was going to take place in Poland, and I looked at a Polish map, and I found Kolisberg and was right on the ocean, and so I put the candy store. It was part of the ocean and whatnot, and then the popcorn factory was down the street. And I made the guy because he was going to be the guy who developed the bombs. He was a chemist. And so I felt he might have the knowledge to do this sort of thing. And it actually took him, although not in the book, it took him a couple years to figure out how to eliminate the trace elements. And he did it. He had a secret lab in the popcorn factory building. And his wife, of course, was also a chemist, and she didn't know anything about this, that he was developing new popcorn flavors or whatever, but he was actually developing bombs. And he was very shrewd about, but he envisioned himself being the equivalent of Marie Curie, who was a very famous Polish chemist and Nobel Prize, etc., a couple prizes, and he likened himself to her and hoping to get recognition. And so that's how he came about, and um, and the story just goes on. It adds his nephew who assists him in selling the bombs, et cetera, et cetera.
And how was your research process with that? Like a chemist, did you have to also like research about chemistry and bombs and
Right.
popcorns and candies?
Yeah, I mean I certainly didn't know. I knew some of the things that they could use to set the bombs off, et cetera, like pressure switches, et cetera. And, so I could include that as to device. But as far as manufacturing and what they did, I didn't have any clue. Made it up.
That's part of the creative process. I mean, I was watching one of your interviews, and it's really interesting. You mentioned that you don't really outline your books, you just write them as they come, and you create characters and let them just solve their
Yeah,
problems organically.
it
Yeah.
really it amazes me also as to how this process works in my brain. I mean, um, I honestly bring the characters to life, and I'm not sure how that occurs. I mean, I get them and they're doing specific things and et cetera, whether they're making bombs or using computers to break into banks. I don't know. But along the way, I found them and they found their jobs.
Yeah. Um,
It's and again, it's I honestly I don't even in most of the cases I don't really edit my books until almost the end or whatever, but sometimes I'll write 3 or 4 chapters and I'll go back and read them and I'll correct some grammar or something, but I don't really do an in-depth edit until the
mhm.
book is finished. And so that's also unusual about maybe my writing versus others. I'm not
Yeah.
sure.
So you would say you don't really have a blueprint when you just start. You just let it
No,
flow
I don't.
organically.
I just follow the flow as it goes, and I know in the case of the Polish popcorn company, when Paulie meets Jack for lunch and his car gets bugged, I mean, they put a GPS under his car and whatnot. But that I reached that point and it sort of became a block in that, hey, this is the end of the book. I mean, I've written a story, they've gotten together or whatever, I know, and I had to figure out how am I going to extend this thing? And the way I was going to extend it was making Paulie win the war against Interpol and Jack for a while. And at that same point, Jack had to change the strategy. They were looking for Paulie's house and they couldn't find it because one, he moved many times, but they couldn't find it. And so I had to come up with an idea as to how they're going to find Paulie. And the idea came through Boris, who began studying delivery companies. And they discovered they knew he was in Belgium. And they started checking delivery companies over a very wide area. And they picked out some patterns. And sure enough, they picked the right pattern and discovered how he was getting his materials. And so then they started doing surveillance on the various routes from that business down to a little city called Udin, where they transferred the materials to another person. And by doing surveillance on that person, they were able to eventually be successful. And it extended the story by a few thousand words. And
That's
I mean, that's the only thing. I mean, I had targets of doing 300 pages and 70,000 plus words for all my books. And so I
mhm.
had to extend the
Right.
stories, make sure the stories lasted that long.
That's fascinating. I was actually going to mention you all, you mentioned in an interview that you also hit like a blocker in one of your books, and then you thought of this idea of a GPS glitch. And then this guy was on the chase, and there was a GPS attached to his car. But then when he was chased down, it turns out that he paid his friend to be in the car. And that ex also extended the story, which was really interesting when I first heard that too. Um,
Yeah.
s- yeah, so
And
I,
that
mhm,
incident changes Jack's strategy.
yeah.
And he realized they could not find him through looking for a house or something. There had to be other ways to find him, and it was the delivery of materials.
Yeah. Yeah. Like when you were just describing it, I could imagine it visually in my head. Like I could imagine this universe being like a full-on series, that
Right.
would be a classic. But let's talk about actually your creative process, but I think it also like a analytical process when you hit like a blocker. And I would assume that your strategy is just to kind of like see how your protagonist or antagonist just um deal with the challenges in clever ways. Um, do you think that like raising the stakes against your hero is the way that you deal with your blockers?
Whenever I had a what's called a writer's block, I guess, I mean, I would sit down and sometimes I just avoided it for a week or so, and I do other things. It's interesting when I was doing, I'm not sure if it probably was the Polish popcorn company. At the same time, I was applying for a patent on a technical device.
Oh, wow.
And, and I was 88 and I was working with patent attorneys and as to what wording, et cetera, how you write the thing and what tests do you need, et cetera. And at the same time, I was writing Polish Popcorn Company. And
Wow.
I somehow found the time. I mean, there were some days where I had to work on my patent, some days I decided just to write, et cetera. And they both worked out successfully. I was awarded a patent on my device.
Would you be
Yeah,
able to share a little bit about that?
it involves a key components of what's called shakers or vibration test equipment for testing items. And I decided I got interested in 3D printing, and I decided all these things were made out of magnesium and had to be cast and drilled and everything. I said, I'm going to do this using 3D printing. And I studied 3D printing and I got some advice from some people and I read up on it and I created the components out of 3D printing, was able to do
Wow.
it. And it got accepted by the patent office.
You were 88 when that happened.
Yeah. So
Wow. That that's so interesting. If you don't mind me like pivoting a little bit back to my observation when I said that, because it really interests me when people are both like very analytical and creative, because sometimes people are like one more than the other. And
right,
I was reading up on your story and your personal life of being very resilient, your career of being very technical, data driven, and then sales and marketing, persuasion, and people skills, and then becoming a novelist, which is like very imaginary and very creative, but also injected with research and real data. And
right.
I want to ask for, I guess it's cliche, maybe your advice or your worldview of how you have dealt with life's challenges as Harold, not just as someone who writes Jack. When you are faced with challenges, do you go into analysis mode or do you go into creative mode? Like how can I creatively face this challenge or how can I overthink? Yeah.
It's probably a little bit of both, and one of the things is that even surprises me somewhat is how I'm still able to do this at my age. And I tell a lot of my friends that are not quite my age, but they're getting close. And don't retire.
Mm.
I think if you retire, sit in a chair and watch TV or whatever you want to do, work on your computer, play games, whatever, um, you're eventually going to kill yourself
Mm.
uh, through inactivity. My own habits are one, I have a decent diet. Two, I go to the gym 2 or 3 times a week, work out for an hour. I try to walk 4 to 6,000 steps a day
Wow.
uh, to keep up my physical being, but exercise also helps your mental
Hmm.
being. And so I stick to this routine all the time. And some of my friends that are in business and one I have a relationship with, as I'm a investor in a company, call me and start discussing technical issues, and I can switch real easy. And I discuss that, and then I go back and maybe in the afternoon. Most of my writing is done in the afternoons or evenings.
Mm.
For some reason, I mean, it's quieter or whatever, and um, so. Um, what was interesting, I think Blanton Arms was written in 30 days. That in
Wow.
itself. Now, it wasn't edited or corrected or whatever, but the book novel, as far as I'm concerned, was written in 30 days. I wrote
Wow.
every single day and kept to it, and it, everything came out right. So, when I get tendencies and I'm sort of locked into something, I have a
Hmm.
tendency to stick with it until it's completed.
Wow.
Yeah. So that's
That's
for my technical stuff or my writing.
yeah. Uh, that's actually a practical yet a good tip. I would be embarrassed to show you my steps per day. I think 3,000 steps would be a good day for me. But yeah. So I actually want to ask you because you mentioned that like don't retire, don't be idle. But I think the newer generation is becoming a little bit more idle when it comes to just doom scrolling on social media or heavily using AI. I wanted to ask for your opinion. What do you think about the use of AI these days?
I actually don't use much social media except look up things on Google or it's great for researching. Uh, Siri or Alexa, give me an answer, will you? And and AI is very interesting. And by the way, very interestingly, on my latest book, it was edited using AI, and it took
Mm,
one day. And it took one day for a
yep.
70,000 word book, and came back with changes and whatnot. And not only that, the changes made were written as if I had written it. I
Yep.
mean, AI is pretty powerful in some areas. I don't know if you know there is software for doing this, and it's rather expensive stuff I asked about. I think Adobe was the one that was they did my book with. It's a new world, but I'm sort of fortunate in that when I graduated college, I was an electrical engineer.
Hmm.
There were no electronics,
Right.
no electric engineers. And my first job was in a semiconductor factory. There were only three of them in the United States, maybe
Wow.
in the world. There was three of
Wow.
them. And I went to work for one in Massachusetts. And I remember a headhunter called me and said, would you like to interview with Texas Instruments. They had a factory. And I said, no, I don't know. I was doing development work on certain transistors. And they said, have you ever been to Texas? I said, no. They said, well, we'll fly you there first class. This was from Boston. And I flew
Wow.
down there and I got there like 11 o'clock at night and the temperature was real high. And I said, my wife will never accept this. But I went to interview with them. And what's amazing today, when you think of it, their building and labs and everything else were not much bigger than the average house.
Wow.
They were that small.
Wow.
And so I started there to what I can now talk about AI or I can talk about 3D printing. I
Yeah.
came from an era when there was no electronics, and yet I started working in electronics, and it was quite interesting.
Was that a personal choice to take that course in college back in the day when it was not that, um, you know,
There was no electronics being taught. We were taught electrical engineer was somebody that built power stations,
hmm
transmission lines, this sort of thing. That was the
yeah.
electrical engineering. So now I jump into semiconductors and then I just watched it grow. And I was involved. I developed some interesting products myself along the way. I had experience of I lived in Taiwan for 5 years for a company called RCA. I lived in Hong Kong for 3 years, uh, selling and marketing, but strictly in the electronics fields. So I've seen it from many different angles, and I enjoyed it all. I enjoyed the ride, and I learned
Wow.
from it. So I've
And
had those kind of experiences are kept my creative juices running, I guess.
yeah, definitely. And also being immersed in different cultures, like the Asian culture, completely different. Um, so that must have also been a really interesting experience for you to live in Thailand and Hong Kong, different
Right.
work ethic. Um, yeah.
The other thing that, you know, gives me some edge is I was involved in a lot of firsts. I say firsts that when I lived in Taiwan, I joined forces with another engineer and we started a small company dealing in electronics for importers around the world. And so I got a chance to extend my range a little. But I also developed the first calculators, small portable calculators. They were only
No
the second
kidding.
one in Japan and one in Taiwan was mine. And I was the first person to sell calculators in the United States for under $100, a small four-function calculator.
And why
I
is not
developed
that on
it
your
at the
website?
time.
That's crazy.
Yeah, that is crazy. So
Wow.
I've seen electronics go from there to here, to where we are.
Wow.
And technology in general, not only electronics, but technology. But most of it's based on electronics. I mean, all the things that are happening today. And so how that affects my creative talents, I don't know,
hmm
but it does. Maybe it's always been there, and it's just moving my creation from one field to another,
Yeah.
you
But
know.
also, I think your creativity and intellect, that's something that nothing else can replicate. I mean, Um,
Right.
that's really crazy. I actually would want to kind of to tie that back to your writing and the unified theme of being highly intelligent is a double-edged sword. And this central thread that like the nature of trust, whether in your book, like the patient and doctor, or being a CIA operative, yeah.
The factor of trust is interesting, the way it's been put. In in my sales and marketing days, um, one, I dealt with some very large companies, Motorola, IBM, Kodak, Pitney Bowes. They were my customers. And I always tell them the truth. I would never make promises I couldn't keep. And so I built up a wall of trust with my relationships with big companies, and they bought from me. And so when I started writing delayed diagnosis, it was really the patient has to have trust in the doctor, that the doctor is telling him the truth, that the doctor is examining him properly, and that doesn't happen at all in delayed diagnosis, as if you've read it, I don't know. But so it's my own personal focus that trust is important to me. And it shows up in my work and it shows up in my book.
I mean, it's a powerful thing. And
Yeah.
I also think you gain a lot of trust from your viewers by doing due diligence of your research, you
Oh,
know?
okay.
Yeah. Um, Now, conscious of time, I don't want to keep you forever, although I do want to. Um, my last question is, before we move to the next segment, is I know you also talk a lot about resilience and using failure as data and not actually a stopping point. So I wanted to ask you, because you've had a lot of accolades in your career, what does success mean to you? And does the concept of failure ever exist in your mind?
To me personally, it's means that I've overcome some challenges. I have figured out how to approach a problem, call it an opportunity or a challenge, and be successful at it. Um, and another interesting thing is I've never done it for money. I've often felt that if you are successful, the money is going to come to you, right? I mean, as a salesperson, I got nice bonuses because I was successful. You know, that people trusted me, my sales were good, and I got paid net. So I never started out saying, well, I can make this much money or that much money, even with the books. And actually, I've made very little because I'm not with a major publisher. You know, you almost have to be with a major publisher to get decent sales. So, uh, yeah, writing is not an easy job, as I'm sure you've interviewed enough people to know that. That you know, but my Polish friend up in Northern California, used to tell me, write for yourself. Write so that you feel you've written a good story.
Mm,
And then he said, something will happen to it eventually. So, I mean, that's been my theory. And that's been my concept of success is that A, I finished a book. I've now done finished 4 books, but also in my technical stuff, I completed a lot of things, did a lot of things that I was successful at. And so, um, if I fail, I learn something.
mm,
You learn from failure. Many people don't, unfortunately. But
yeah.
I learned this isn't going to work. So I have to do something different and be flexible, and eventually success will come. And age, it's not necessarily age related, as as I'm evidence of. You can still think. I don't know if you read recently, a doctor has issued an interesting story on what's called super agers. There, there are people that are like myself who are still creative in their 90s and pushing 100. So, and there's reasons, he gives reasons why and et cetera, as to how you act. And so there's certain guidelines to follow. We can have this interview again when I'm 100.
I would be looking forward to it, definitely. And hopefully
As
by
I
that
come
time I
out
would,
when I did
yeah.
do my 18th book or something.
Yeah. Yes, yes. And
Okay.
hopefully, yeah, like you would be having your own series and movie adaptations, and Jack Hudson would be a real person. I would be I would be excited for that.
It's interesting, I guess, because my personality and somewhat my looks, uh, people and many of my friends, they all take me for being in my 70s.
Yes.
And and even people talked me on the phone and said, oh, you're very good. And I said, I'm 90 years old. I'm going to be 100. I'm 91 this year. So, but
Oh,
try to stay that way and stay happy and etc.
yeah. Yeah. That's honestly really inspiring. Thank you. I think a lot of people lose sight of success and chase money instead of letting money chase them. But also at the end of the day, it's not about money. So, um, yeah,
Yeah,
uh,
too many people are fixated on money,
yeah,
and um, um, we all know money doesn't necessarily buy you health or happiness or whatever. That it's your
mm,
own doing that makes you happy and successful. And I strive for success because I want my books to be good, etc. And that's a form of striving for success. But I'm not
mm,
measuring myself monetarily. So
definitely. Um, wow. Now, I have three more questions for you. They're part of a segment called What Would Harold Do? So I kind of want to put you in your own stories, but as Harold, not as Jack Hudson. So what would Harold do in those situations with what you know and what you have and the technical and physical skills that you have? So I have three questions of what would Harold do in the setting of three different books that you've written. So first, imagine like you're in the position of Jack Hudson. You're walking back to your rented apartment in Moscow late at night, and then you feel like the heat of a sniper's bullet past your ear. Now, like the GRU has a bounty on you, and you don't really have the CIA combat training because, again, you're not Jack Hudson. Now, what would Harold do in that situation?
God, I'd start running like crazy.
Just start ducking.
I certainly would try to get out of the way, uh, but because there's not much more that I could do, especially I don't carry a gun or anything like that, and
Yeah.
uh, so I mean, my only thing would be to run from it.
Yeah. Honestly, that's the only answer that would seem possible in that situation. Um, okay. Now, the second question might be a little bit more realistic. Now, this is inspired by delayed diagnosis. You're at the hospital, or no, let's say you're in your daughter's apartment, like how it actually happened, and you discover a strange, like, spot on your forearm. You go to the hospital, present it to your doctor, but he dismisses it and says, like, oh, it's nothing, it's just part of aging, whatever. But then he's actually a master manipulator, as you know in your book. And then it's actually stage 3 melanoma. What would Harold do in that situation, knowing that his doctor is actually manipulating him?
First off, Harold would try to get a hold of doctors that could cure him.
Hmm.
The the point of going after or chasing down a wayward doctor um, would would be thought of, but it would be a secondary thought. My first thought would be on my personal health and how can I cure that, and then once I could do that, I could attack the other issue. And obviously, it would lead to where my protagonist it led to an attorney, et cetera, et cetera.
Yeah.
You know,
Yeah. Okay. So, last question. Now, this
okay.
is inspired by Polish popcorn company. Let's say you're investigating Polly and the candy maker in Poland, but then secretly engineering a way to, build bombs. Now, tapping into your background in electronics and your corporate strategy, what would Harold do to outsmart a killer behind the candy store?
Well, it would be an awful lot of research. Um, and in fact, Jack and Boris tried to find out what sort of components they were using. Once they learned saw a bomb and got components, they could figure out where they were coming from uh, and how to stop them, etc. Um, and that turned out to be very difficult, by the way. But Harold probably wouldn't do much different than what they did. I
Yeah.
mean, because hey, if I could dream that up, I could answer the question, right?
Yeah, definitely.
So, I mean, I think my answers are in the book
Mm.
as to what I would do
And
because, yeah.
I
So, I
mean,
mean, that's,
well,
you know,
that's also a good teaser for our viewers to read your book, um, because it's actually interesting how they strategize. I mean, you gave a little spoiler about the GPS glitch and the delivery um, system, but it's still an interesting read. But now, before I let you go, before we wrap up, where can our audience find your books?
Amazon, probably Barnes and Noble, they may have to order them, I don't know. But those are the two main spots. They're probably in other bookstores. I think of the first two books have audio visions as versions also of the book and they're also on Amazon. So listen, people can listen to them. So, in fact, I know Blanton Arms and Delayed Diagnosis have audio versions.
And I guess the best way that our audience can stay connected with you is through your website. Is there any
Yeah,
other place
there
you're
is
on?
there is a website, right? Harold Myers Author us.com. Now
Yes.
you may ask why dash US.
Mm.
In in England, there's an author named Harold Myers.
Have you ever connected with them?
No, I have not.
That would be a funny story, though.
Right? I mean, it
Yeah.
is. I mean, I was surprised. I looked it up and whatnot, and yeah, there's an author in England named Harold Myers.
Yeah. Wow. What are the odds? Um,
Yeah.
but it would be funny to connect with them, to be honest. That would probably make another story, or maybe you guys can write together. But yeah, so Harold, is there anything else that you would want our viewers to know before I let you
No,
go?
I appreciate the time you've spent, and it's been interesting. And you've raised some issues or questions for me that stimulated other thoughts. And no, I appreciate it very much. And hopefully, my only thing would be that hopefully some of your listeners will buy books and they actually have my email address. They can write, and I'll be happy to answer any questions from them. What else does a retired guy have to do?
Definitely. I will ask our viewers to flood your inbox. We'll link it in the description below, as well as your website and your Amazon. But Harold, thank you so much for spending your time with us. I hope our viewers, the next time they hold a calculator or they go on their phone, they think of you. That's actually really interesting. I'm so glad you shared that with us. But aside from that, thank you so much, Harold. I hope at least I'll get another interview before you turn 100, but I also wouldn't complain if you didn't come back to us in like 9 years.
Okay.
Yeah. Thank you so much,
Thank you.
Harold.